Hello and welcome. My name is Neema Rimber.
And my name is Allison Gibson.
Welcome to Raise+Raise Connection Series podcast, a vibrant, powerful space created by Black women founders for Black women founders. This isn't just a podcast, it's a movement to amplify, celebrate, and champion the brilliance that is Black women entrepreneurs in Canada.
Here we go beyond the surface, diving into the real, unfiltered stories of what it means to be a Black woman running and building a business. From city to city, we've listened, we've learned, and built conversations around the very pain points that matter to you most. This series is your front row seat to expert advice, honest stories, and game-changing strategies.
Like I said before, this is more than a podcast. It's the start of a movement, a platform where we rise together, sparking conversations that lead to lasting change. And it's all made possible by the visionary support of the BDC Thrive Lab, whose commitment to empowering women-led businesses is driving both positive social and economic transformation. This is only the beginning, and you are at the heart of it. So let's rise, connect, and transform the future of Black women entrepreneurship together. Let's go. Hello and welcome to the Raise+Raise Connection Series podcast. Today we're talking everything money, and so money moves and demystifying the funding landscape. My name is Neema Rimber, and we are joined today by Jillisa Brown and my colleague,
Allison Gibson.
A warm welcome. And so let's just get this show on the road. I will start by introducing Jillisa. And actually, I do not like to talk for people. I think it's good for us to be able to big up ourselves. So Jillisa, over to you. Give us a quick little introduction about you and what you're all about.
Thank you so much for having me here today. I really appreciate being welcomed into this space. So my name is Jillisa Brown. I am the daughter of Grace Brown, who is the daughter of Delsina Mitu, who is the daughter of Amanda Smelly, who's the daughter of Maud Dennis. And I always show up 100% myself in the space. And to the Black women that are also watching this, it's so important to bring your authentic space and bring who you truly are. So that's why I always show up with my ancestors on my back and on my shoulders defending me. In this space, I actually jumped into the funding world around 7 years ago when I learned about the Social Finance Fund. Around that time, the Canadian government had announced that they had $755 million to put out for social finance. And, they claimed to want to reach BIPOC communities, but not many of us or none of us really knew what was going on. And so I entered that space in the hopes of allowing to provide more folks with access to information. And that rolled into many very cool opportunities, including me being on grant review committees, loan review committees. I also was the former executive director of a group called the Table of Impact Investment Practitioners, which we brought together a community of practice for fund managers across Canada that were also interested in the Social Finance Fund. And so through those opportunities, I was able to learn a lot from the social finance intermediaries that find themselves in the space and that are also wanting to invest in BIPOC communities. In addition to that, I also run an accelerator program for Black women called the Sisters in Solidarity program. And so through that and the work that I'm doing at Funding Impact, I've been able to support entrepreneurs with investment readiness. And so I'm so glad to share my experiences with you all today.
Thank you so much and welcome. It does look like you've been doing the most, but the most in the very, very best of ways. Yeah. We love that. And I think you started to touch into it. And I'll literally just hop into it. Can you share a little bit about your journey with funding and venture capital? You've spoken a little bit about it in your introduction, but yeah, tell us a little bit more, with these committees that you've been on for grants, loans, some of your exposure, with the Social Finance Fund, all those elements. Tell us a little bit about that.
Absolutely. So I'd say that my first venture into the entrepreneurial world really started with partnerships and collaboration. I really had the opportunity to come together with community in order to solve a problem. And because we were able to partner together and figure out how we can partner with others, especially those that have funding, we were able to, push the needle forward. And because of that, we actually applied to a lot of grant opportunities, not just grant opportunities where they said, okay, you know, the grant is open and the applications are open, but we actually built relationships with folks that have money. So foundations and large social purpose organizations that also wanted to meet the same mission that we were. And so because of that, we were able to say, hey, you know, you're trying to solve this problem. We are also trying to solve this problem. But guess what? We are working in the communities that you are hoping to reach. And so let's do it together. And how about you write us a $50,000 check to help us all get to create the impacts that we're looking to create. And so I would say that that was really my first experience into getting funding for my business. Again, building partnerships and relationships with community and those that have funding. After that, in addition to like the regular grants applications that were available, I really spent my time to educate myself in regards to what was going on within the social finance ecosystem. And so learning, you know, what a social enterprise is and just understanding that a lot of folks from the Black community are running social enterprises, but they just don't know. And so all it means is basically you're taking some of the profits from your business and putting it back to create impact, whether that's social impact, environmental impact, and really allowing things to be just more meaningful than just the finances, right?
Yeah.
And so even if we think about how communities might say, okay, let's take some of the profits and create like a youth program, or let's welcome in youth to have some capacity building opportunities. Like those are social enterprises. And so, you know, just allowing ourselves and community to be able to identify ourselves in this space was always very important. With my experiences at the grant review committees and loan review committees, it's definitely been special for me because in those spaces, I was always welcomed on as the person of color that was supposed to help them see things differently. This was around 2020, you know, when the world was just figuring out that there was a lot of value that we held as a Black community.
Yeah.
And so I definitely felt like a token in those spaces, as we often do. But even then, I really had to speak out for myself, but also for community and let them know, like, just having me in the space, of course, it supports in a way, but it's also not as productive as you think. Because in these spaces, so this had happened during COVID. And so on the grant review committee that I had sat on, you know, naturally, some people got sick and they were able to step away from the table and have somebody else come in and replace them. But for me, being the only Black person in the space when I was ill or, you know, mentally incapable of doing the job, if I had stepped back from the table, I mean, that means that there's no Black person at the table anymore. And so that was very mentally stressing for me. And I had to speak out and let the funders know, like, hey, this is not okay. I see that you're trying to solve the problem, but there's definitely greater ways to do this by inviting more folks at the table and not feeling like, you know, the problem is solved by supporting one Black person.
Yeah. I mean, it's nice to be included. It's nice to be in the room, but it can't all fall on your shoulders. It's a lot. It's a lot. And so you mentioned a few things in terms of like grant review committees, venture capital. And one of our goals for this is to, of course, share knowledge and information, but really just break it down and demystify this whole world of funding. So what would you say are the key differences between, say, someone looking for funding for their business that might go the route of venture capital versus other funding options like grants, a traditional loan, or anything like that?
Yeah, so I'd say venture capital is basically private investor that invests a large amount of money within your business. That can be anywhere from $10,000 to $100 million, depending on what stage you're at in business. And because they're taking the risk at investing this money into your business, there also comes with some loss for you as a business owner. So that means that you're losing some equity, meaning that some of the portions or shares of your business no longer belong to you. They belong to the venture capitalist or the investor. And so that's definitely something to consider as you're making this decision. With this also means that some of the decision-making power no longer belongs to you. And so you definitely want to ensure that you're considering some of these things. Yes, gaining investment in your business is super important and helpful, but you need to understand that you lose some of the decision-making power within your business in doing so. Um, with grants, it's a little bit different because you are not losing decision-making power. However, there are definitely some frameworks or requirements that you have to live within. So, grants are really great. They're non-repayable. They're non-dilutive, which means you don't lose any equity in your business. However, you have to stick to the rules. And so sometimes what I'm finding is that entrepreneurs want to go for grants or squeeze themselves into a grant simply because it's non-repayable, but it's not always like aligned with their actual business. So it kind of takes them off of their path.
Yeah.
And grants are a lot of work. Sorry to cut
Exactly.
you off, but writing a grant is not for the weak. I've done a lot, and I think maybe the first, let's say 20 grant applications I did, I was not successful in any way.
Yeah.
But when I started to get better at them and get feedback and figure out, okay, this is how you write a grant application, it's time consuming. It's literally a full-time job in itself. So that's something people should be aware of. You don't just send in this little application and get the money. It's a process.
It does take 5 million years. It's literally giving an eternity later. And I think also there's that element of competition because it's non-repayable. A lot of people are just kind of okay, fine, let's go that route. So it ups the competition. But then again, to your point, sometimes there's some of that rigidity insofar as, okay, the grant is 50,000, 100,000, 300,000, whatever, to be used in XYZ kind of ways. There's XYZ reporting that's associated with it. So there's that kind of rigidness. And then to an extent, there's also kind of the short-term nature of grant funding in itself. It's okay, we'll give you this for X period of time, right? So then once that well dries up, you kind of have to look for what is it called? Water in other places.
It's like the grant hustle. You get one, but then it doesn't stop. You're always looking for the next source of water, right? So it's not as streamlined of a funding process, I would say, is working with an investor or going the venture capital route. There's lots to learn. To your point, it is a little bit more risky. You're giving up equity in your company, amongst other things. But once the money, you secured a source of money or a pot of money, typically it's a little bit easier to continue accessing funding or getting more investors. I say easy lightly because also that's not for the weak either. We'll talk about that later though. But that's such a good point.
Yeah. But the one good thing then I would say, with all those things aside, I feel if we're looking at targeting specific communities at different intersections, whether it's Black folks, Black women, you're going to see a lot of targeted grants, which at least then that if your pool will look like XYZ kind of people because they're trying to also elevate that given group. And I think that's definitely the pro when you're kind of looking, and especially earlier on in your business, you're oh, where can I look for money? Where am I trying to dilute myself the least? Where am I trying to go as quote unquote where I'm wanted? I think that's definitely one place that grants really come through. 100%. The one thing that we didn't touch on though is loans. Which Allison and myself went across the country talking to a lot of Black women founders. And one thing that did come up was, of course, folks, loans is a route that they go, but how it might work in their favor and how it might work against their favor. But even before they get to that, one big thing was I don't even qualify for the loan, or they're telling me I don't even qualify for the loan. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about that.
Yeah. And, I think that one thing that folks that are giving out loans right now needs to consider is the fact that a lot of people of color have a lot of money trauma related to loans and credit. And so that's a lot of times the reasons why folks are not always going out for the loans, because they feel like they don't qualify. And so for those that are providing loans, it's also consider the fact that if you have a 35% commitment to invest in Black or BIPOC communities, also consider the fact that the investment needs to be a little bit more catalytic. We can't be saying okay, you need to have 3 to 5 years of audited financials, knowing that it's a startup business. They're not going to have that in place. Maybe let's consider the fact that maybe interest rates coming down can also support these communities. And so I think that like keeping those things at top of mind is important, but also those that are putting themselves in a position to gain loans. It's all about strategy, right? I think that the reason why a lot of folks fail is because they think it's just another way to gain money into their business, not thinking, okay, what are the strategies that need to be associated with this? How am I going to pay back the loan? Am I generating enough revenue, or do I have the opportunity to generate enough revenue in the case that things just don't work out? How am I going to pay this loan back at the end of the day? These are some of the things that we need to consider for sure.
Yeah, it's the funding roadmap, right? It's not just about getting the money, it's managing it. What are your plans and how are you paying this back?
Exactly.
Most important, which I see why people like grants, right? You don't have to pay it back and whatnot. But yeah, that's such a really good point.
Yeah.
Makes me think of a resource to
And
share.
I think also in my mind, I'm like, okay, if you're locking me out, like, for many times it's like systemically, because my credit worthiness against like, traditional lending, like is not stacking up, because again, there's kind of that money trauma. Sometimes I'm carrying like multiple generations of like trying to like, get ourselves to like an even playing field time after time. It's also then important to be like, okay, fine, if this is not where I can land, where else might be pragmatic for me, like, to go. So like sometimes like, CDFIs, like credit unions, they might have like, better like lending practices. They themselves have a lot of like community mandates to support innovation and spur like movement within small businesses. So that's one avenue. I would say also like peer-to-peer lending. Now it's starting to kind of pick up. Kiva, I think recently I also saw, is it Wovio? Like kind of
Wovio
those,
is
exactly.
But essentially, I think what you're kind of highlighting is like go where you're welcomed. Go after the money that also is interested in you, right? So I always say to founders that I advise, everyone's like, I want to work with investors. I want to, get venture capital funding. And I'm like, cool. There are steps to get there, but most important, you need to make sure that the capital is values aligned. So the person, the bank, the grant, it doesn't matter the source of money. It needs to jive with what you're doing.
Exactly.
Otherwise, if you're starting off on different, like the misstep, that false start, it's going to come back and bite you in the hiney at some point. Oh my God, hiney.
In the caboose.
But I think what you're highlighting, whether it's a credit union, it's a really cool, new lending platform like Wovio. There are solutions out there. And I just think you need to look for the capital or the funding that aligns with what you're doing and not worrying about the outside noise, or everyone's talking about venture capital and investors. That's nice. Because if you're not ready and it's not for you, then you shouldn't be looking there. So good point.
Yeah. And so now we've been talking options, and obviously so many options like that are available out there. So how can founders go about kind of like finding what is the best fit for their business and their business needs at any given stage?
Yeah, I think that some of the things that we need to do, of course, is consider the stage of business that you're at. If you are early in your business, trying to get $100 million investment probably is not the right stage.
Shoot for the stars.
That's what I was going to say. I thought Lupita said my dreams are valid, but I see what you're saying.
Take baby steps. You have to crawl before you fly.
100%. Yeah.
So definitely considering the stage of business that you're at, and then considering what we talked about before is, what am I willing to give up in my business? Am I willing to give up a portion of my business? Am I willing to give up some of the decision-making powers within my business in order to gain this type of funding? What do I need the funding for? Right? If I'm someone that might just need funding for hiring or marketing, that's going to look a little bit different if I need money to, do product development or implement AI into my business. So definitely looking at the purpose of the reason why you're looking for funding definitely helps you find that pathway. And excuse me, also understanding that you're able to get more than one different types of funding, right?
Yeah.
There you go.
You don't have
Yeah.
to stick with one pathway. Like you
100%.
can go the VC route, but still also apply for grants.
In fact, you should.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I don't think you shouldn't be putting your eggs all in one basket for sure. Yeah, such a good point.
Yep. So making sure that you're doing that. I also actually built a course on this, finding your funding pathway.
There you
So
go.
we can definitely share that resource with everyone.
I love this.
Oh yeah, we love resources.
We love a resource.
Deets in the description, in the comments. I don't know, like wherever it'll show up, best believe it'll show up. We
show up
got
somewhere.
you. There's a whole course. Yeah. I would like. I think I agreed. Depending on like where you're at, I would say ideation like very early, like probably bootstrapping. Friends and family. If you got a rich uncle, hit him up.
Or a rich. You might have a rich aunt.
Oh lol. Thank
Right?
you.
Yeah.
Yes, you could have a rich aunt.
Yeah, we're in our rich auntie era, anyways. Okay.
Yeah, rich auntie, hit her up. I'm lying. Don't hit her up. Don't hit her up.
No, don't ask me for money. No.
Yeah. But yeah, like super early, it's gonna look like grants. It's gonna look like bootstrapping. It's gonna look at like family and friends. Sometimes you have like some of those like really really early stage angels who like will also come on board. And then I feel like then like as you go next step, then you start incorporating like some of those VC dollars, maybe we're going a little bit extra ham like with the grants. And then by the time that you've hit like now you're full on like scaling, growing, like at that point in time, then I think you can definitely like optimize your equity financing. One thing we do see quite a bit working with founders is the issue where like folks started a little bit too early with like VCs and angels. And so by the time they're getting into later stages of their businesses, they're so overly diluted that like you've done all the hard work, you've invested all this time, you've built this startup like on your back, and then you have like 2 shillings worth of it, right?
Well, there's nothing in it for investors and angels, by the way, angel investors. They typically, like we see them investing in earlier stage businesses. But as a founder, I was advised very early on when I was raising, you don't want to give up too much equity because there's only a certain amount of room, right? So if there's 100% of equity shares, a stake in the business, don't give up too much in the beginning because as you advance, there's nothing left for other investors to get involved with later on down the road.
Yes.
So I always think of Shark Tank or Dragon's Den or something when they're like, I'm going to give you $100,000 for 30% of your business. I'm like, no, you're not. Not over here, you're not. And I mean, in the moment, it's like $100,000. That sounds great. To give up such a huge chunk of your business, not wise, because then steps down the road when you're like, I need $1 million, $100 million, whatever it is, but you've given away 30, 40, 50% of your company. There's nothing left. There's nothing in it for venture capitalists, investors to, jump in on later.
Right.
And this makes me think of something. So we're talking about, go here for money, go there. There's money everywhere. What about the rejection? Because you're going to hear no way more than you hear yes. So do you have any tips, suggestions for how founders, especially those who are new to pursuing like venture capital funding, how do you navigate and like kind of bounce back from the no's?
Yeah, I think one of the most important things is always ask for feedback. Like hearing no, of course, is going to happen many times, but you're going to continue hearing no if you're not able to go back to the drawing board and say, okay, let me fix some of the things that others have been saying no to. It gives you an opportunity to strengthen what your ask is and even strengthen your business, right? And so asking for the feedback is super important. Also, I think having mentors and people that understand your business from a different perspective can definitely provide a lot of that value into you. And in regards to that resilience, I think that as entrepreneurs, it's a lonely journey sometimes. And so having your peers and mentors that are able to, continue to push you and support you definitely can help with some of that resilience. And, just ensuring that understanding again that this is a journey. So, take things one step at a time, ensure that you're able to pour whatever is needed into your business to continue along the way is super important. And I think in all things in life that we do, understand that, failure is not the end. It's just an opportunity for you to learn and for you to get better. And so the other thing too would be come into community, right? Because as you entrench yourself deeper and deeper into communities with entrepreneurs that are doing things like you, that are also trying to get investments, you'll hear those other stories and understand that you're not by yourself in all of this.
Exactly. And this is a great way to build community. And we mentioned we've traveled across Canada. We've talked to a ton of women founders, Black women founders specifically, and that concept or theme of community came up quite a bit.
Mhm.
But something you said just at the beginning of when you were sharing advice was ask for feedback,
Mhm.
right? You can get tons of no's, the doors will be slammed in your face, but you can ask. And I do this, and I love when founders do this with me. If they
Mhm.
book a follow-up call to say, okay, maybe I didn't win this pitch competition, or maybe, I pitched to this investor and they said no. Can I get feedback as to where I can improve, or why did
Mhm.
you say no? Because sometimes
Right.
it's timing, sometimes it's misalignment or whatever. But they may have really good critical feedback to give to you. And you said ask for help, and I just heard my grandma pop into my head with my grandma saying, if closed mouths don't get fed, right? If
Right.
you don't ask, you're never going to know. And so I think of investors that I talk to and work with who say that they look at a ton of pitch decks, right? They'll hear a lot of pitches, sometimes hundreds in a year, but they'll only invest in like 2, 3, 4, maybe 5 businesses.
Mhm.
So I guess not to get discouraged is the main kind of
Yeah.
takeaway. Ask for help. And if you are getting feedback, make sure you're integrating that right away. In fact, I recently participated in a pitch competition, and there were, I don't even know how many pitches I heard, a ton of them. And I was giving people feedback, and I kept saying, if you want to know more, if you want to chat further, reach out to me. I'm always available. Well, they all did. So it was cool. I was like, I have a lot of calls now. But I love that literally almost everybody that I gave that piece of advice to, okay, great. Can we book even a 30-minute call? And as I was giving them feedback on their pitch decks or whatever, they were updating in real time.
Mhm.
Love that. So I think that's such a key piece of advice. Don't be discouraged by the no's.
Yeah.
Take it in stride. Take the feedback, implement it. It'll only help
Right.
you get better.
Right.
And
When
I think then in line with that, I would then say stay visible and stay persistent. So as you're incorporating that feedback, like let me catch you everywhere in these streets. Like pull up to the pitch competition, you're there. Pull up to the networking, you're
Yeah,
there.
there,
Pull up to
exactly.
the accelerator program, like you're there, like
Yeah.
that kind of a thing. Like it's a very big space. There's many entrepreneurs, but it's also kind of like a small space. And so the more you're staying like visible and persistent, I think that's helping you. It's keeping you top of mind.
Yes.
It's keeping you like, oh, when we think of this founder for XYZ, oh yeah, I've seen them pitch, I've interacted with them, I've done
Right.
XYZ, you're always going to be top of mind. And then in line with that, I would say also seeking out like various awards and recognition, right? Folks are always going to have FOMO for like all these additional titles, and they're always looking. Someone could have been won this pitch competition, been a 30 under 30, a 40 under 40, a 50 under 50, whatever it is. Like there's multiple places.
50 under 50.
You can always keep pushing the benchmark. It's like, I wanted to be 30 under 30. Oops, never mind. 40 under 40. Oops, never mind.
I squeaked in. They were like, how old are you? I was like, 40. They're like, you're in. So we came at the last moment. Yeah.
Exactly. But you see, those awards and recognitions themselves are also lending themselves to that continued visibility that does help you.
Right.
And we've generally, of course, been talking about investment readiness, all these different funding avenues. I think one key question that then people will ask themselves, how will I know that I'm investment ready? Hey, what is the sign? Or what do I have in place before I approach all these given groups? Off the top of your heads, top 3, let's call it. What would you say?
You can go first.
Yeah, I definitely would say market validation is a huge one. The investors want to know that whatever it is that you're offering, people actually need it, and they've proved that.
Right.
Do you already have a list of customers? Have you already made sales? Is there a wait list for your product? Being able to prove that validation is super important. Another thing that I would say is having your finances in order. The loan review committee that I sit on, that's one of the biggest question marks, I think. People will have their business plan, which is another thing that you can have in place, but folks will have their business plan, and then their numbers just aren't making sense. The math isn't mathing, but we need it to make sense. The investor really wants to know that you understand your numbers and you understand that at the end of the day, you're able to create profit and also repay the investment and some. Another thing that I think really helps in the investment readiness space is understanding the narrative of your business, being able to tell the stories of impact that you're looking to create, and making others feel something is super important. I guess the last huge one is data always gives you that boost that you need that you didn't always realize. So, being able to provide statistics and proof for the needs and how your solution is going to work and how you're solving a problem. And, the fact that your numbers are really meaning something, I definitely think brings you a long way.
That's
I love that.
100%.
Anything data driven, I
Yeah.
find like people like are thirsting for the knowledge and the information.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's a key point of feedback I often give to founders. It's like you're making these claims, but it's not rooted in any fact, any data, any numbers. It needs to be a little bit tangible.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's such good advice. I wouldn't add anything other than what I hear about as much as people are investing in your business or the idea you have, they're investing in you.
Mm-hmm.
So make sure that you self-promote, big up yourself, talk about yourself,
Yep.
right? Like women in general often get that feedback when in pitching that that perhaps they don't perform as well when compared to men because they don't brag or boast enough, right? They're very rooted in like, here's what I'm doing. I know this is a great idea. Give me money.
Mm-hmm.
And people are like, but did I feel it? I didn't believe what you were saying, or I didn't connect with you is often what women would hear, or I didn't see your personality shine through. Like, here we go. Okay, cool. So I always tell founders, make sure you're leading authentically, you're speaking, of course, you're into your truth, your values, and what you're proud of with this business. But as much as people are investing in the business idea, they're investing in you. Because we know a large amount of businesses fail, especially from first-time founders. That doesn't discourage banks, investors, anyone from investing in you. And so I've heard this time and time again from investors that they're looking for someone who has those entrepreneurial qualities. So if you can demonstrate that to whoever, if you're in an interview at a bank, you're pitching to an investor, it's the same thing. They want the same information, but they want to see that you have what it takes. So that just say this business venture doesn't take off or it needs a little tweaking, you have what it takes to kind of pivot, roll with the punches, or even start from scratch again.
Right.
It gives them a lot of confidence in that, oh, okay, she knows what she's doing.
Yeah. And I think the final thing that I would add is yes, you have all these different things, but know them too. So I've had like, sometimes, I found I'll come with like this really robust like financial projection and it's kind of like, okay, walk me through it, might have a highlight. You start like asking specific questions and it's like, and I'm like, okay, cool. You can be like that. But like over time, like you learn these things and putting your best foot forward before you meet these investors, these banks, like all these different like funding options is that like you are on top of your game, you know your T's are crossed out, your I's are dotted, and your data room is like completely set. I said data room just in case like some folks need like some context for that. We'll have like a glossary of terms just so that you can get like all this information. There is a couple of additional like, funding options. Like, we didn't talk a lot about like crowdfunding and whatnot, but we can share a little bit more information on that. And so then like, as we're kind of like, coming to close, we've been talking about like, the funding landscape and, all these different things that are there. There are definitely some biases that come into play. So at risk of centering these biases and challenges, what I'll ask instead is how can the funding landscape in Canada evolve to better support like Black women founders? And in thinking of this, you can think of like the challenge and then the solution that could come from it.
Yeah, I definitely say that there isn't as much data as we would like to be available for Black women founders. But we do know, so I started by saying there was $755 million put out by the Canadian government. That is only one chunk of funding. There is a lot more. However, less than 1% of Black founders received backing from the government funding. And so there's a really big problem with that. I think that a lot of funders are focused on diversity, equity, and inclusion. They figured out that they need to be more diverse. They said, okay, let's include more people, but then you're throwing them to the back of the line, right? And so I definitely think there's a lot more consideration that needs to be involved with allowing folks to be able to like receive equity in the space. And so again, like ensuring that the funding is catalytic, understanding what the needs are. I think that's another big issue, is that a lot of funders say they want to welcome more diverse folks. However, they're not speaking to them straight off of the bat. So because a lot of Black women founders are not a part of the design process, whatever they're creating ends up missing the mark. So I definitely would say have more conversations, listen to what the needs are, and figure out how we can do some of these things in more productive ways, to ensure that the folks that you're trying to reach actually have the ability to be eligible for the funding.
I think that's very, very, very important.
The mic was on.
Yeah.
Hello.
No, 100%, because so many times it's like, oh, okay, XYZ needs to happen for, ABC group of people, kind of a thing. And someone's like, why? Or like, show me the data that shows me why. And there's no, but then you go look for the data, and it's kind of like you're pulling at, I've forgotten the English phrase, but like you're really trying to look for ways to find this like data, and you can't like find it. Pulling teeth. It's trying to find the data is like pulling teeth, right? And so like, yes, we need to bridge those data gaps. But then on top of that, like going to like what you said in terms of how the money was accounted for. Yes, people are like, oh yeah, we have these DEI initiatives 1, 2, 3, but like there's no data to tell me like how much or what went where. So then I think the next step beyond that is then the accountability on some of those metrics, right? There should be a level of accountability to provide transparency on that, because if you said that you had like X millions and you gave a part to underrepresented communities, but like say you had 100 million and like 300,000 of that is what went to those communities. You see, if we're giving that like accountability, for you to then come and say 0.3% with your chest is going to be a problem, right?
I don't want 0.0
I don't want
anything.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I love the comment about data, and like quick shout out to New Power Labs for doing that. So if you're a founder, honestly, if you're anybody and you're looking for info and stats, we can include this in our resource list or whatever we're doing. Hot tip, New Power Labs is the only organization I know that's looking at how capital flows or doesn't flow to underrepresented communities, and the numbers are disgusting. They're all
Completely,
like you said, 1%. I think the highest number of anything I've heard for capital flowing is like up to 3% of funding. It's like, that's not enough. So that's such a good point, right? We need to really be talking to those that we're trying to work with and serve, but making sure that they are centered. Participant-centered design is a thing for a reason. So I love that.
Yeah. And then I would say, last but not least, amplifying those success stories, because they are success stories, right? Like shout it from the rooftops. Like be like, oh yeah, this person did XYZ, or this person is working on XYZ, and like this is why we're supporting them, and this is what they've done in that point of time, and then this is how it has like grown over time.
Like you said, say it with your chest.
Exactly. With
Say
your
it
chest,
loud and
within the
proud.
community, outside the community, like keep that story like going. I remember like when Claudette with Protexa had recently finished their round, and I was seeing it like a lot like in the community coming up, and I was like, yes, tell everybody, right?
Everyone.
And then even in reading about that, then I found their previous round had been led by BKR Capital, which invests like in Black tech businesses. And I was like, yeah, here's part of the story now that I've learned from like all this amplification. But then it's also reiterating like why this representation matters, because like BKR was like also ready to lead with their chest and literally put their money where their mouth is. Because like they believe in supporting that, and like it has that like ripple and domino effect, and it's catalytic, like you said, right? One feeds into the other, feeds into the other. So yeah, shout it from the rooftops. Of course, we wanted to get into a lot more, but in the interest of time, just gonna do like a quick parting shot. Any parting shots?
Floor is yours.
I definitely would say again, thank you for having me in this space. I think a lot more folks need to listen to Black women. So definitely wanting to see more of that. But thank you for leading the way. And for myself, I would say come and find me, because I'm like really deeply entrenched in the social finance world specifically, which means I know a lot of the funders. I'm working with entrepreneurs in regards to investment readiness and also impact measurement, which also helps us figure out those accountability pieces. So connect with me.
Connect with her, and where can folks find you to connect with you and keep this discussion going?
Everyone can connect with me on LinkedIn at Jillisa Brown. I'm also on social media. You can find me at Funding Impact.
Fabulous, fabulous. Thank you. Thank you
Thank
so much
you.
for this conversation. I think it's been a great start. We're going to be, sharing a lot more resources. We're going to be sharing where you can find Jillisa. And then hopefully, all together, we are, moving this conversation forward, and we are in corporate speak, moving the dial.
You're moving the dial.
Great. And then, once again, shout out to BDC Thrive Lab for their support in making all this happen. And yeah, we will catch you in the next episode. In the meantime, feel free to share this episode with anyone you think might benefit from it and part of this, ongoing conversation and movement.